Hello everybody, John from Image Engine Productions, and we're here today for a short After Effects tutorial on how to create realistic fire effects with Trapcode Form. Before we begin, let's have a look at what we're going to be making today. It's this fire effect right here, and as you can see, it's quite realistic. It's very organic, and it's got a nice flow to it. And we have a nice contrast with some deep blacks and some quite vivid oranges, and it's really quite realistic, and it's also quite customizable, as we'll find out. So let's get right into creating this. We'll start off with a new composition, and we'll call this Trapcode Fire. And we just want 1280p and 25 frames per second and 10 seconds on the clock, and hit OK. And let's come up to Layer, New, Solid, and we'll call this Trapcode Form. And let's come up to Effects, Trapcode, and Trapcode Form. Now it doesn't look like much right now. All you see is a square right at the center of the screen, but just to show you exactly what Trapcode Form is, I'm going to add a new camera. You don't have to do this. I'm just wanting to create this camera so we can zoom in on what's at the center of the screen, and you'll have a better idea of exactly what Trapcode Form is, and perhaps have a better idea of what you can accomplish using it. So we'll zoom in and we'll rotate the camera, and you can see here we have 3 planes of particles. You can always create more, but this is what is known in Trapcode Form as the base form. If we go up to the top of the menu list and we click on base form, this is our box grid. There's a whole lot of other base forms that you can use. For instance, you can use strings, which are basically strings instead of particles, and you can also do, for instance, a layered sphere effect. But for this lesson today, we're going to be sticking to the box grid. I am going to get rid of that camera that I created earlier so that we can move right along and create our fire effect. Now the first thing we want to do is we want to tell Trapcode Form just how wide we want this plane of particles to be, and we're dealing with a 1280 by 720p composition. So what we're going to do with that is we're going to make our plane slightly larger than that, because we're going to be distorting it and displacing it. And what will happen if we don't make it slightly larger than the frame is that plane of particles is going to shrink, and we're going to have black areas all around the outside. So let's crank up this this base form so it's just a little bit wider. So we'll go for something around 1340. That sounds like a good number. That should give us lots of room at the edges of the comp so that the screen is full. And now we're going to go to Y, and we're going to do the same thing. We're going to dial this up to let's see, about 860. A little too far there. Okay, 860 will be fine. Size Z, we can just skip over that because this won't have any effect on the fire effect that we're going to be creating here. So the next thing we have to do is we have to tell Trapcode Form how many particles we want in this plane that we're creating. So we're going to use a lot of particles. Let's start with maybe just under 1200. And we can certainly adjust that later if we decide we want a different look. So we'll take it up to, say, 1176, 1177, 1174. And now we're going to adjust particles and Y. And I found that for this particular effect, with this comp size, approximately 830 particles seem to look just about right. So we'll take this on up to, let's see, 838. We can work with that too. Now what we want to do is we want to make sure that we only have a layer of one particle in Z-space. So in other words, that's going to leave us with one sheet, if you will, of particles, just one particle thick, and that's all we want to produce this effect. So we've got our particle grid set up. The next thing to do is to add some color to it. So let's come down here to Quick Maps, and Quick Maps is a place where you can assign colors to your particles. You can determine also how those particles are mapped on the X, Y, and Z axis if you're using more than one layer. What we want is we want the color map. So we're going to twirl that down and open it up. And we're only going to be dealing with two different colors for our particles. So we want to pull some of these extra colors out of here. Just like that. Just click on them and drag. And we want our first color to be black. So double click on the red knot and make this a solid black. Now we go over to the right hand side and let's use a color that's maybe a deeper orange color. Something about like that I think should be right. Well, maybe just brighten it up a little bit and click OK. And what we're seeing now is we're just seeing a white screen because we have so many particles bunched together on this plane that we've just created. It looks like one solid object, but that's going to change very shortly once we start making some other adjustments. Now what we want to do is we want to assign these colors. We want to tell Trapcode Form exactly how we want these colors mapped. So what we'll do is go just below the color picker box here where it says map opacity and color over, and what we want to do is we want to select the y-axis. And there now our particles have some color. They transition from the black that we created all the way to the deep orange. So that's great, we're in good shape so far. Now what we have to do is we have to look at displacing these particles so that they look more like the fire effect that we were trying to create. So let's go further down the menu here, and we want to find the displace menu item, and we will find that under the fractal field actually is where this is located. Now you might be wondering what is meant by fractal field, and just to explain it as simply as I possibly can, Trapcode Form actually uses, and if you've been using After Effects for some time, you know what fractal noise is. You've probably used it in an endless amount of projects. Let's have a look and see what fractal noise looks like, just to refresh our memories. You have the lighter areas interspersed with the darker areas, and this is the same kind of noise that Trapcode Form uses to calculate its displacement effects. So that's why when we go into the Trapcode Form menus, that actually says fractal field, because it uses the very same fractal noise to calculate displacement values and apply it to the plane that we're going to be creating in this project. So what we want to do is we want to start dialing the displacement up a little bit, and we're going to do, I'm going to just keep dialing it up to maybe the low 60s and see how that looks, and I think that's going to be about right. There we go. That gives us our initial look. The flames look to be quite realistic. We have lots of good contrast, lots of deep blacks and brilliant oranges here, and it's all showing up rather nicely. So the next thing we have to do is we have to put this into motion, and what we want, the motion that we want is going to take place along the y-axis from top to bottom, and we want the motion, the evolution of these particles to go from top to bottom. So what we want to do is we want to come over here where it says flow on y-axis, and we're going to use a negative value because we want our particles to go from the top of the screen to the bottom. So let's dial this in to about -100, maybe just a touch more. So there's 105 now on the settings, and let's just have a look and see how we're doing so far. That looks like the kind of motion that we're after, so we'll stick with that for now, and we'll head further down to, I'm going to look at our octave multipliers, and we're going to look at the complexity, which is 3. We probably won't adjust that because I think it's just in the right place. Now, just to explain a little bit what these controls here do, your complexity, for instance, if we dial our complexity up, we'll see some changes in how these areas are mapped to our grid. We're using a very, very high complexity here, for instance, and what that means is we're adjusting that fractal noise pattern to reflect a lot more detail. There's a lot more twists and turns in these particles than there was before. So that's what our complexity control does. Now we're going to want to keep our complexity scaled back to about 3 because anything else is just going to be too much. So we're going to take this back to 3, and we should be right back to our fire appearance again. And that's all these controls do here, is they control the amount of black space versus white space in the fractal field, as well as the scale of the black and white areas on the map. So that, in summary, is how to create a realistic fire effect with Trapcode Form. And I hope you've learned a lot by watching this tutorial today, and I would like to thank you for joining me. Have a great day, and we'll hopefully see you again soon.